Good afternoon, everyone. Can I have your attention, please? People in the back, can you guys hear us? Okay, back there, wave. All right, back over here. Outstanding. I would ask, we're getting ready to bring Rob up here to do his presidential speech. I would ask that everybody right now take just a moment of silence. Isn't that awesome? If we could do that for the next 45 minutes, that would be fantastic. Because Rob's going to come up, he's got some important things to say, and I got to say, having worked with this gentleman for the last year, I'm really looking forward to what he has to say. But I want to introduce Rob to you. Many of you know him, many of you may not know a lot about Rob. Rob actually hails from the great state of Texas. Woo! He's from San Antonio, a proud Davy Crockett fan, as you can see here in his Davy Crockett t-shirt that he wore until it actually literally fell off of his body. Here he is with his first communion with his dog Rusty. And actually what we find is that his upbringing, both school, church, as well as his family, had a big impact on who Rob is today. I think one of the really interesting stories that Rob told once was about his father. After Rob had wrecked his car, rather than actually chewing him out the way I might with my daughter, his father simply sat him down and said, "What did you learn? What did you learn?" And I think if you know Rob really took that kind of, those kind of values, and you see those in him in his leadership every day. Rob has had a long, storied career working at many of the great institutions that are represented here. Went to school, Trinity, down in San Antonio, and interestingly enough, went off to Michigan. You Michigan folks here. Michigan for graduate school. And what's interesting is that was the first time Rob had been north of Dallas in his life. And he said that he wanted to go off and explore the great world, which he has clearly done. Got his first job at Temple University. Actually moved back then to Michigan to be the director of the Survey Research Center, and did a number of groundbreaking studies as that organization was really coming to the fore and has been a powerhouse ever since. Moved off to be a VP at NORC before coming to the Urban Institute where he is today. He did, though, take a little side venture at one point, and went off to be a partner at Newstats down in Austin, which is now his second home and will likely be his place of retirement somewhere in the future. And then ultimately here, coming back to the Urban Institute to be their chief methodologist, chief statistician. Rob has had a tremendous service over the years to AAPOR. Been elected to council 3 times, secretary-treasurer, conference chair. Interestingly enough, I was conference chair, he was the associate, and then this past year it's been the reverse with the presidency, so it's been great to serve with Rob multiple times. He also, though, has been very active in one of our sister organizations, ASA. He is a fellow there, and he was just recently elected to be vice president of ASA, and I think that deserves a round of applause. We trained him well for that position. He's also done a lot of work with the government. The National Academies, in particular, has called upon his services for numerous types of studies. But what I find really interesting, I think, about Rob is the sheer work that he does. It's just an amazing, he's really at the center of a lot of the core issues that we have out there today, whether it's homelessness and hunger, Medicaid, the World Trade Center following up on survivors, looking at the Latino community, voting rights, a whole host of things that Rob has been involved with and helped to better society with the work that he has done. I think that, again, is just fantastic. Also, in his home life, Rob has been very, very blessed with his wife, Dell. They have 2 children, Emilio and Clarissa, and a granddaughter, Renee. And I will say this past year that Rob and his wife celebrated 40 years together. 41 coming up. So Rob is a fantastic leader. He's been a great mentor. He's a great person. But you know what? When Council and I were on mimosa breaks every now and then at our meetings, we would start to compare notes. And we go, wow, this guy's just perfect, isn't he? He's just like a little too perfect. We started to compare notes. You know, Rob is a great researcher, and yet, you know, he's never published in POQ or JSSAM or even Survey Practice. He, world known, the man has never traveled over an ocean, by boat, by plane. He's a Texan, and yet he claims to not have a gun. Claims to not have a gun. And of course, he is also part of the Michigan mafia, so to speak. So the question I think that we really need to raise here is, who is the real Rob Santos? Well, luckily here at AAPOR, we have a vast array of resources that we can call upon. A lot of organizations delving into the data, giving us all kinds of information. We pulled together a crack team of data scientists, didn't give a care about theory. We were simply there looking for patterns. And we also brought in a few experts to help us really delve in to find out who is this Rob Santos really. So we brought experts in secure data, astrotheory, and interrogation methods to help us get to the real truth of who Rob Santos is. And I've got to tell you all, it's a little disturbing, so be prepared. Now, some of you may know that Rob is an avid fisherman. Well, not only does he have a fearsome reputation for cleaning out every single fishing hole that the man goes to, but as we poured through the data, we found a very disturbing pattern starting to emerge. A ritual of sorts that Rob seems to go through after every hunt of the fish. Not only does the man catch the fish, but he taunts the fish over and over again before ultimately sending them to their ultimate end. Oh, Rob. Well, many of you may know as well that Rob is an avid amateur photographer. And, you know, they say the picture can paint 1,000 words. And if you talk to Rob will tell you that he's got two main focuses of the pictures he likes to take, Baby Boo and his granddaughter, Renee. But the fact of the matter is, again, as we started to really look at the data, as we looked at the patterns, as we looked at what was out there, again, we found more to this Rob Santos than meets the eye. Now, some of you may know that Rob loves to cook. Well, did you know that he takes pictures of food? The man takes pictures of food and he puts them on the internet. Who does that? Rob is also well known for going off to Austin every spring to the South by Southwest Conference. And some of you may have seen this picture, which graced several magazines. A great picture of Michael Wang there. I'm not sure who the guy is that's photobombing Michael behind there. But I got to tell you, these are the daytime cleaned up pictures that Rob takes. The fact of the matter is that when the sun goes down and the spotlight comes up, you'll find Rob in the mosh pits taking pictures of things that just, I don't know, it's just amazing. Yeah, it's almost as if Rob is single-handedly trying to show people that middle-aged people are not stodgy, boring, and uninteresting. And last but not least here, there's this ancient temple. Nobody knows really how this was built. You know, ancient astronauts have their theories. But Rob seems to have a real focus and obsession with this particular building. We're not really sure why, but he takes picture after picture after picture of this particular building. So we brought in fictitious historian Dan Brown to see if we could get to the bottom of Rob's obsession with this particular building. And again, I got to tell you, this really will blow your socks off. What's going on in that particular building is that they are cloning Rob Santos's. We don't know how many We don't know how many are out there. We don't know how many copies that are being made. But this does explain one thing, how Rob could be so productive this year, how he was able to get so much out of his presidency. It was really fantastic to work with Rob this year. I know all of the council just love working with him, and I got to tell you all, he's been a fantastic leader for all of us. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a big hand to our president, Rob Santos.
Well, thank you very much. I thought that I was going to get a blowtorch, a grilling here, actually I thought that was good. So thank you very much, Mike. That was very good. So, well, everybody, good afternoon. I'm really excited to be here. I'm here to. I wanted to make sure that I said everything exactly the way I intended. So rather than just kind of talking to you, I brought a speech. So forgive me while I read the speech, but it'll be good, hopefully. The first thing I wanted to do is to thank Michael for his great introduction, to thank you as AAPOR's as individuals, members. Over the course of the last year, on several occasions, we've asked you for feedback, and you've provided that. You've really come forth, and I really appreciate that. Now, volunteerism in AAPOR is a highly regarded value shared by our membership, and it's a labor of love. That's what I've been doing here for this past year and will continue. So it won't surprise you then that I want to express deep gratitude for Council, because Council did an amazing job making my role very easy. And I also want to do a shout out to the AAPOR staff, because without them, we could not have gotten done what we did do. And I wanted to acknowledge the great service of our now full-time executive director, Susan Tibbetts. So thank you very much. So just a couple of more thank yous, and then we'll get going. I wanted to thank the Urban Institute, because they're the guys that let me do this. They actually not only supported me in doing that, they supported the institution of AAPOR, and they supported you. And most of all, I want to thank my wife of 40 years, who couldn't be here today, so I'm kind of bummed about that. But she exhibited great tolerance, support, and love, and has carried me through what I think has been one of my busiest years. It's been a blast, but it's been incredibly busy. So that brings me to my address. As most of you know, I'm a practitioner, a mathematical statistician who was lured into the world of survey sampling, project management, survey operations, and social science research. Although I spent the first couple of decades of my career in the academic survey research world, the last decade and a half has been really entrenched in public policy research, as you saw. And for those of you whom I've been fortunate enough to work with, you know that I love being much closer to that policy action, even to the point of doing some qualitative research, designs, focus groups, in-depth interviews, and the like. But I still do a lot of large-scale probability sampling work in terms of designs and overseeing those. And I do a lot of statistical consulting, so it's a great mix. But the point is that I'm addressing you today in a very different place than I started 35 years ago, when I was pretty much just mathematically trained and I knew a lot of logic, but not much else. And my thinking has changed as well through these different experiences that I've been through. And so I'm going to share with you my particular thoughts on where I think AAPOR should be going with that perspective. And I invite you along for the ride as we go on our thought journey here. As leaders in public opinion and survey research, we in AAPOR pride ourselves in establishing and promoting research standards. We provide guidance on valid statistical inference, scientific rigor, and of course, we're huge promoters of transparency. But I'd like to challenge us by posing a few questions. Is our current leadership role sufficient? How can we be doing a better job? And are there gaps that we could be addressing? I'll come back to these questions at the end of my address, but in the meantime, I invite you to ponder them while I give you some context that helped me formulate my thoughts that I'm going to present to you later. I'll start with the statement that I made when I first ran for office. I believe that we are in the midst of a renaissance in this country and globally. Just in the last 10 years or so, advances in technology have transformed how we interact with each other, with whom we interact, the frequency with which we interact, and the immediacy of the interactions. And the access to information has changed the nature of how we experience life, how we make decisions, and even how it tempers the way we think about the world and how the world thinks about us. Our nation's demographics are changing in profound ways. Minorities are becoming majority. The population is increasingly becoming a melting pot of races, ethnicities, culture. These changes have been accompanied by an explosion of information sharing technology, including all kinds of polling data, collective knowledge sharing on the internet, creative new ways of visualizing quantitative information, and inconceivably potent ways to store and access data. Along with our exposure to these new capacities and capabilities comes an acculturation process on how we use and access them, as well as the purposes with which we might use them. And thus was born social media. A culture has emerged for how we exchange ideas and sentiment, how we express preferences, likes and dislikes, how we share friends, and even how we eschew perceived unfriends. The culture includes participating in silly Facebook polls like, "What kind of ocean animal are you?" and giving feedback in customer satisfaction surveys following an online or telephone transaction. It even includes participating in opt-in panel surveys just for their rewards or for fun. What's funny is that when we participate in some of these things, we even want to know what the results are. And by the way, I'm a jellyfish. Just say it. That's how I roll, man, as an ocean creature. We extract meaning from all these interactions, and we can have emotional investments in them. In a real sense, we're acculturated through the social uses of a technology, and that process includes the consumption of more and more data, even if the information lacks the intellectual value that diet soda lacks in nutritional value. But then there are other sources of information we tap that can indeed provide valuable insights and make our lives better. Smartphone apps for navigation, the app for our conference program, other apps help you exercise and become healthier. You can even get on the internet with your smartphone and look up our AAPOR best practices. The point being that we've become acculturated as an information and data-rich society. We're exposed to ratings, preferences, opinions by orders of magnitude more than earlier generations. And of course, not all the quantitative data that's being dispersed originated from rigorous, scientific, well-designed studies. Does that mean that it's useless? I won't say yes. I can't say yes. But I can say it depends, and I'll tell you why. But this brings me to my next discussion theme, the concept of actionable insight and our insatiable thirst for knowledge. I define actionable insight as inferences, implications, interpretations, extrapolations that flow from information or data we collect that are sufficiently strong to allow a recommendation or a decision to be made. AAPOR members, as social science researchers, are very familiar with actionable inferences. As most of you know, my day job is in a public policy think tank. We're all about actionable insights. The pursuit of knowledge is always in the context of a societal issue related to policy, from immigration reform to tax policy to the Affordable Care Act, food insecurity, the list goes on. We seek insights to elevate the debate on vulnerable populations that struggle with making ends meet or are trying to just find a place to live. The concept of actionable insight is critical to public policy researchers and to all researchers for that matter. In fact, such insights are the major takeaways in our annual conference research presentations here in Anaheim. Only here, our actionable insights are typically predicated by tests of statistical significance and margins of error. My fellow AAPOR members, punchline, no. I believe that there are other types of inferences that are arguably as powerful, even though they may not meet the threshold of statistical rigor afforded by analyses from probability sample surveys or randomized control tests. Yes, this sampling statistician right here is talking about qualitative research. I've tasted the fruit of the qualitative research tree, and it was sweet. Here's an example. A few years ago, just before planning our challenging Phoenix conference, remember the one with the SB 2010 anti-immigration issue? I helped design and was involved in a qualitative research study to explore the plight of undocumented immigrant families who were detained as a result of worksite ICE raids. We traveled to small towns and big cities from coast to coast to find and interview families of detainees, the community leaders, local government officials, and the like. In one of those interviews of the detained families, we heard about a young breastfeeding mom who was detained for days without being allowed access to her infant child, and even after pleading her case to officials. That one interview, N=1, led our research team to recommend that ICE create and implement a consistent policy to ensure that detained parents receive humanitarian consideration for custodial release so that their children, most of whom were US citizens, could receive the parental care that they needed and deserved. And if you're thinking, well, what does this have to do with research on opinions or behaviors? I'll add that we collected rich data on how families, communities, and even a small town jurisdiction were devastated by some of these raids. We captured people's sentiments, including their post-raid behaviors, like the family that locked themselves in their houses pretending not to be home for weeks for fear of being arrested, and the local grocers who became financially distressed because their sales dropped dramatically for months as the local community was too afraid to venture outdoors, or the small town that went bankrupt because their major source of tax revenue was shut down as a result of the raid. For this qualitative study, it was enough to gather the range of experiences of this population without generating a point estimate or a confidence interval. And the information was sufficiently cogent that actionable inferences in the form of findings, recommendations, and so forth could be drawn. But I expect that you know about we're social science researchers, I expect you know about the value of a good qualitative study. So let me stretch the concept just a little bit further. Let's talk big data and one of our old big data friends that we beat to death. By now, most of you have heard about the Google Flu Trends project. It uses harvests of search terms in real time to monitor for potential influenza outbreaks around the country. It was established about 5 years ago and hailed as this great illustration of the use of big data for the advancement of public health. It's now gone worldwide, using data visualizations to show the activity geographically, using counts of 50 million searches a week. And its early success in the US was remarkable because it could forecast hotspots well before and inexpensively compared to the CDC's usual physician report-based methodologies. Although the method has encountered a problem of overstating the severity of an outbreak last year due to a media event of all things, it remains a highly attractive and popular surveillance tool that's been expanded to at least another disease and has gone worldwide. It features the data visualization maps as its principal communication vehicle on its website. And you can see that they do not have any indication of statistical significance, nor estimates of variability in the exposition of their results. Their indicators are far from perfect, have unknown sources of error. They rely critically on being able to correctly predict the types of words that people are going to use when they get ill. And so they have some problems. Yet they found a use in society. And this is I think, a good illustration of a model-based analysis of organic data that's being provided for Actionable Insight. Now, so far, I've talked about how we in society have become acculturated to a data-rich environment, how gaining insights is not restricted to just statistical inference. The next step in this journey is recognizing the bigger picture research process, and that it's often a multi-method one involving mixtures of qualitative and quantitative research. Now, the health services research arena is the cleanest illustration that I have of this, although it's ubiquitous. In my time as a study section member of AAHRQ, did 6 years of that, reviewing grant applications. It was hell. Sorry. But it was perhaps the richest educational experience in my life as far as research studies are concerned. I saw the perfect grant application, and it was one that posited a specific problem and used vital or official statistics then to prove its importance or significance. And then it had a literature review that established existing knowledge and the knowledge gap, where the gaps were. A conceptual framework was then posited that showed how various personal factors and environmental factors and systems and policies affect people's attitudes and then their behaviors. Preliminary research in these types of perfect grants were often involved qualitative research, in-depth interviews or focus groups that were used to validate the underlying conceptual framework and adapt it to the particular population they were going to be looking at. And then that was used to motivate research questions and research hypotheses. You probably know, some of you academics know all about this, right? And then that led to a quantitative research study, often involving a sample survey or a randomized control trial. And the analysis then was conducted, and then a small qualitative study on top of that at the back end was created to create like a sandwich design, mixed method, qualitative, quantitative, qualitative. And that proved to be very powerful, because not only could you get the how much out of the quantitative, you could get the whys in the contextual richness of the data afterwards. To me, the mixture was profound. It made me realize that insights and knowledge come from a larger investigation process, and that survey research was but one tool, admittedly a valuable tool and an important tool in the researcher's overall toolbox. But it wasn't the only one. And I saw and have experienced now that statistical inference isn't the only way to generate insight. And it's with these thoughts that I'll ask you one more time. Is AAPOR's current leadership role sufficient? How can we be doing a better job? Are there gaps that we could be addressing? So here's my qualitative synthesis based on that context. Over the last couple of decades, if you look, AAPOR has focused heavily on guidance in the conduct of quantitative research studies such as survey research, scientific polling, understanding sampling, non-sampling error, measurement error, and so forth. Implicitly, by doing this, our leadership has been confined to a subset of the research methods that can yield inferences. This includes estimating parameters with measurable levels of uncertainty, conducting tests of significance and calculating margins of error and so forth. But by not directly speaking to these other qualitative and other types of research that are emerging, we fail to recognize a key element of the societal renaissance that's currently going on, that we've been caught up in, that of gaining insight from non-statistical inference. So I assert that the time has come for us in AAPOR to seriously consider expanding our leadership footprint more broadly to include those other types of methodologies. I recognize, and I know you do, that this is this expanding leadership role would include non-traditional new methods representing, and it would represent an enormous challenge. There are no easy answers out there, because if there were, I promise you, with our wonderful task forces, we would have found them already. If we were to offer guidance about non-traditional research methods, we'd need a framework with which to help categorize the strengths and weaknesses of the almost limitless different approaches that are appearing in our world. I have an idea about that framework, and you may be familiar with it. It's this, if you read the Non-Probability Task Force report, it's the concept of fit for purpose. Our task force report devoted a chapter to fit for purpose in the context of data quality. But here I'll be brief and perhaps a bit simplistic by saying, in my mind, the concept of fit for purpose is the balance that researchers seek between available resources, the rigor of the research design and implementation, and the nature of the insights needed to effectively address the research questions. Implicitly or explicitly, it's the fit for purpose framework that leads qualitative researchers to subjective samples, to non-probability samples, and semi-structured interviews, while it leads the American community surveys to pursue 95% response rates and use gold standard probability methods and field techniques. It also leads non-government policy researchers to conduct telephone and online polls that have single-digit response rates, with or without probability sampling. And it reflects the heavy reliance on opt-in online surveys by market researchers to explore preferences on commercial products or services. And let's not forget that the explosion of model-based data products, they're flooding our society right now. This year, I've had a number of media inquiries for commentary on such methods as tweets to predict elections. In fact, a well-regarded Bayesian statistician has recently published a paper showing how he was able to use Xbox surveys in combination with other data and adjustments to predict the 2012 presidential elections. Yeah, you heard correctly, Xbox surveys. So let's not forget also the flu trends and other similar big data products that use data analytics and generate all kinds of inferences. Society has been embracing all these sources of input, rightfully or not. We in AAPOR need to have something to say about this, for if we limit our leadership focus to traditional classical methods of scientific public opinion and research, survey research, I fear the world will pass us by. Instead, I propose that we use the fit for purpose as a starting point to develop guidelines about the broader spectrum of research and research methods that can provide insight. This is a real opportunity for AAPOR, I believe, although I reiterate it's a huge challenge. So if you look at AAPOR's portfolio of standards and guidance, you'll see we have a number of task force reports that look at things like pre-election polling, opt-in online panels, polling and democracy, non-probability surveys, and now emerging technologies. We also have the AAPOR code, response rates, dispositions, and those types, and survey best practices. So anyone looking from the outside into AAPOR can reasonably conclude that we are an association that focuses primarily on applications and methods of survey research. And in a real sense, that I think we do. We've defined ourselves by our products, and those products tell the world that methods worthy of standards are those associated with survey research, polling, and its associated statistical inference. But I can't help but ask, is polling and survey research the only way to gain knowledge about opinions, behaviors, and characteristics of ourselves? And if it's not, then what should we in AAPOR do to be speaking out about these other methods? I worry that we've carved ourselves a corner of the research world, that of rigorous probability sample surveys, that's rapidly shrinking. So what can we do? As we look to the future, I'd like to see us focus on how we can gain insight through research more generally, and formally recognize that insights do not always have to come from statistical inference per se. In a sense, I'd like to see AAPOR undergo a metamorphosis to grow out of our survey research exoskeleton and start addressing other ways one can gain actionable insight about human knowledge, opinion, behaviors, and characteristics. This would involve exploring and identifying best practices and standards for qualitative research and for model-based research. Instead of restricting our guidance to the area of survey research, let's turn the conversation on its head. If we accept that research is a quest for actionable insight, a quest for knowledge, then survey research is but one of a larger, rapidly expanding collection of research approaches. That allows other research methods to be acknowledged for the value of the insights that they offer, even if their contribution falls short of yielding statistical inference. Adopting this alternative paradigm offers a framework for a more productive conversation that we can have about the merits and limitations of methods that we've found so difficult to address so far. Under this way of thinking, the Google Flu Trends and other similar harvesting or search methods can be applauded for their value as population surveillance tools, while recognizing their pitfalls. And perhaps opt-in online panel surveys can be recognized for their use in market research applications, even while we retain our caution against their use for generating population point estimates. So I say, let's talk about how we can gain insight and knowledge about human behaviors and opinions. Let's recognize and embrace a growing toolbox of qualitative and quantitative methods to gain insight about public opinion, knowledge, and behaviors. Let's allow the research questions to dictate the combination of methods and approaches to be used that best fit the research question at hand, and to be sensitive to the fact that resources are never limitless, so that trade-offs need to be balanced between quality and resulting inferences. And we need to do this while preserving, and seriously, preserving our existing core guidance on survey research. We need to preserve and distinguish and promote statistically valid probability survey research methods, yet be ready to include specific types of non-probability approaches if a sufficient evidence base can be developed to validate those methods. Yes, changing our perspectives is a challenge, and it won't be easy, and we should recognize that we can't do it by ourselves. If there wasn't a solution, I promise you, we would have found it already. I see value in bringing other perspectives and ideas and experiences to the table. For instance, I'd love to hear from other fields like econometricians, mathematicians, mathematical statisticians, data analytic experts, maybe even philosophers. Heck, I'd even like to see the creative research hack folks, the teams, come and talk about these types of issues, because they have something to say about that. We need to listen better, and we need to listen better to those who offer alternative, even controversial approaches. We need to see potential and opportunity before pointing out the limitations. I was discussing at a conference last year on non-probability methods, and without getting into specifics, I praised the use of exploring patterns, using the non-probability methods for exploring patterns and relationships, but then correctly pointed out the limitations when they went the next step and tried to use them for point estimates. Afterwards, one of the authors came to me and was absolutely devastated, saying they were ready to give up their quest. I went out of my way to encourage this person to continue developing their innovative approach. I told him that the comments were critical only in so much as to spark additional innovation to overcome obvious limitations. He left a bit more optimistic, but you see, I believe that it is precisely these types of creative thinkers and innovators that blaze the trail for what will be a standardized, rigorous method for our future. You can bet that the first telephone or web surveys were not perfect. The same holds here. I'll conclude by saying that I started this address posing questions about AAPOR's leadership role and how we might strengthen that role and identify gaps. I've suggested how we can rethink the current framework from one dominated by survey research-based statistical inference to a paradigm that embraces the pursuit of knowledge through a broader toolbox of research techniques. And I've talked about how we can use the fit-for-purpose concept in combination with a broader perspective of seeking knowledge and insight to develop guidelines for our field and our stakeholders. I'm offering us a strategic direction for further discussion and refinement. It's not a suggestion to open up the floodgates, but a suggestion to open our minds and see opportunity, lest we risk untoward consequences. Thank you very much, everybody. And true to form, there will be no Q&A. If you want to have comments and questions, meet me at the bar.